The room smells of smoke and damp concrete. Above ground, Berlin is collapsing under artillery fire. Below, in a dim bunker lit by flickering bulbs, a man in a worn military coat studies a map that no longer reflects reality. The red lines are closing in. His hands tremble, but his voice, when he speaks, remains steady. In a few hours, he will be dead. But in this final moment, he is not thinking about the armies outside. He is thinking about betrayal, about destiny. About how a failed art student from a provincial border town came to command one of the most destructive regimes in human history. The man is Adolf Hitler. To understand how Europe burned, how millions perished, and how an entire nation surrendered itself to a single will, we have to look beyond the speeches and the salutes. Beyond the war maps and propaganda posters. We have to examine the hidden details. The private humiliations. The personal obsessions. The small decisions that quietly reshaped the 20th century. Because history is not only driven by events. It is driven by psychology. And few lives demonstrate that more clearly than his. He was not born into power. He was born in 1889, in the small border town of Braunau am Inn, then part of Austria-Hungary. His father, Alois, was a customs official, strict, temperamental, proud of discipline. His mother, Clara, was gentle, deeply protective of her son. In their small home, two forces shaped him, fear and affection. He feared his father's authority. He adored his mother's warmth. When his father demanded a practical career in civil service, the boy resisted. He wanted to paint. He wanted beauty. He wanted escape. That conflict, between rigid authority and wounded ambition, never truly left him. Years later, when he applied to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna and was rejected, something hardened. Twice he was denied. The institution that represented validation and recognition had dismissed him as ordinary. He would later blame others for that failure. But at the time, he drifted. Sleeping in men's hostels. Selling postcards painted in careful detail. Watching Vienna, a multi-ethnic empire capital, seethe with political tension and racial ideology. It was here, among nationalist newspapers and street corner speeches, that ideas began to crystallize. The notion of racial hierarchy, the myth of cultural betrayal, the belief that Germany, though he was Austrian-born, was destined for greatness. But ideas alone do not ignite movements. War does. When World War I erupted in 1914, he volunteered for the German army. In the trenches of Belgium and France, he found something he had never fully possessed: belonging. The army gave him structure, brotherhood, purpose. He served as a dispatch runner, a dangerous role carrying messages through artillery fire. He was decorated for bravery. And when Germany lost the war, he did not see defeat as military failure. He saw humiliation. He saw betrayal. The Treaty of Versailles stripped Germany of territory, imposed crushing reparations, and limited its military. For many Germans, it was a wound. For him, it was proof of conspiracy, of politicians and minorities stabbing the nation in the back. That narrative would become central to his rise. In 1919, he attended a small political meeting in Munich. The German Workers' Party was insignificant at the time, fewer than 50 members. But when he spoke, passionately, furiously, something shifted. He had discovered his weapon, his voice. Observers described it as hypnotic. It began quietly, almost conversationally, then built to a crescendo of anger and certainty. He did not argue policy. He offered emotion. He offered blame. He offered redemption. Soon, he reshaped the party into the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party. He designed its flag. He refined its messaging. He understood spectacle before most politicians grasped its power. Torchlight parades. Symbols. Politics, to him, was not administration. It was performance. In 1923, intoxicated by admiration and inspired by authoritarian movements elsewhere in Europe, he attempted a coup in Munich. It failed. He was arrested and tried for treason. But even in failure, he turned defeat into advantage. During his trial, he framed himself as a patriot. In prison, he dictated a book, Mein Kampf. It was rambling, ideological, filled with resentment and grandiose vision. Yet within it lay the blueprint: racial supremacy, territorial expansion, absolute leadership. Few read it carefully at the time. They would live it later. The 1920s in Germany were unstable but improving, until 1929. The global Great Depression hit like a shockwave. Factories closed. Banks collapsed. Unemployment soared. Desperation returned. And desperation is fertile soil for certainty. He promised jobs, national pride, strength. He blamed communists. He blamed Jews. He blamed the democratic system itself. Was it charisma alone that propelled him? No. It was timing. By 1932, the Nazi Party had become the largest in Germany's parliament. Conservative elites believed they could control him if appointed chancellor. They underestimated him. In January 1933, he was appointed Chancellor of Germany. Within months, the democratic system was dismantled. A fire consumed the Reichstag building. Emergency powers were enacted. Opposition parties were banned. Trade unions dissolved. Critics silenced. Step by step, legality was weaponized. And here lies one of the hidden details often overlooked. His consolidation of power was not immediate chaos. It was incremental, calculated, wrapped in procedure. He eliminated rivals, even within his own movement, during the Night of the Long Knives. The army pledged loyalty directly to him, not the Constitution, to him. Germany stabilized economically under massive public works and rearmament programs. Highways were built. Industry revived. Many citizens experienced renewed pride. But beneath prosperity, persecution intensified. Jews were excluded from professions, stripped of citizenship, dehumanized through propaganda. Education indoctrinated youth with racial ideology. Hatred was bureaucratized. By 1939, expansionist ambitions became invasion. Poland fell. Then Western Europe. Blitzkrieg stunned the world. For a time, he appeared unstoppable. Yet hidden within his command style was a fatal flaw: ideological rigidity. He increasingly distrusted his generals. He refused strategic withdrawals. He believed willpower could override logistics. In 1941, he invaded the Soviet Union, opening a vast eastern front. It was driven not only by strategy, but by ideology, the belief in racial conquest and living space. It became a catastrophe. Winter, overextension, relentless resistance. Meanwhile, the genocide of Europe's Jews intensified into systematic industrial murder, the Holocaust. Millions were deported, imprisoned, and killed. This was not spontaneous brutality. It was coordinated policy. And as war turned against Germany, reality narrowed. Allied forces advanced from west and east. Cities were bombed to rubble. Supplies dwindled. Advisors feared speaking honestly. In the bunker beneath Berlin in April 1945, the illusion finally collapsed. He married Eva Braun in the final hours of his life. Then, on April 30th, he took his own life as Soviet troops closed in. The Third Reich, which he had promised would last 1,000 years, ended in 12. But here is the uncomfortable truth: he did not rise alone. Millions supported him, voted for him, served under him, benefited from the stability he initially provided, feared him, believed him. That is what makes this story enduringly relevant. The hidden details of his life are not merely about personal quirks or private habits. They reveal patterns: how grievance becomes ideology, how economic collapse fuels extremism, how charisma can mask cruelty, how institutions erode gradually rather than overnight. He was shaped by humiliation, driven by resentment, sustained by propaganda, empowered by crisis, and undone by his own rigidity. History often simplifies figures into monsters or myths, but understanding does not require sympathy. It requires clarity. The boy who once sketched buildings in Vienna could not accept rejection. The soldier who found purpose in war could not accept defeat. The politician who mastered spectacle could not accept limits. Each refusal escalated. Each grievance expanded, until the consequences engulfed continents. Today, the world still grapples with nationalism, economic anxiety, political polarization, and the seductive promise of strong leaders who claim they alone can restore greatness. The story of Adolf Hitler endures not because it is distant, but because its dynamics are familiar. It asks uncomfortable questions. How fragile are democratic systems in times of crisis? How easily can fear be redirected into hatred? How often do people trade liberty for stability? In that bunker, as artillery thundered above, one man's journey ended, but the lessons did not. They echo in every society tempted by simple answers to complex problems, in every era where grievance seeks a voice, in every moment when power concentrates around a single will. The hidden details are not hidden at all. They are warnings, and whether we recognize them in time is up to us.